And Chair Backus, the recording has begun.
Thank you, Katie. Good morning, everyone. The September 11th, 2025 Finance and Audit Committee is called to order. I am the Finance and Audit Committee Chair, Nancy Backus, and welcome to everyone attending the meeting both in person and via Zoom. For board members joining via Zoom, please remember to turn on your camera and state your name prior to making any comments or asking any questions, so that the public and your fellow board committee members know who is speaking. And Hunter, would you please call roll?
Yes, and this is Katie
Oh,
Flores.
sorry, Katie.
Hunter's unfortunately out sick today, so I'm filling in for him. And I'll call the roll now. Shannon Braddock.
Present.
Board Member Braddock is present. Christine Frizzell.
Present.
Board Member Frizzell is present. Hunter George. Ed Prince.
Here.
Board Member Prince is present. Kim Roscoe.
Here.
Board Member Roscoe is present. Gurmai Zahalai.
Present.
Board Member Zahalai is present. And Nancy Backus.
Here. All right,
And there is a quorum of the committee at this time.
Thank you, Katie. All right, I understand there is no report. Well, there is no report for the chair this morning. And I don't believe there is a CEO report. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, I do
sorry.
actually have a couple items, if you don't mind.
Please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Toward the end of today's meeting, we'll hear an update on recently completed internal audits, and one of those reviewed the performance of FAIR compliance, or FAIR compliance policy. The audit had one finding. The management response is already completed, in fact, but there are also additional actions in progress. But more than that, I've directed staff to research and be able to present to the board a proposal for launching a pilot to install FAIR gates at various key stations, as well as assessing the addition of FAIR gates as part of all of our future designs. We've taken and we will continue to take steps on public safety, as you saw in a Seattle Times article earlier this week, on cleanliness, on the overall passenger and staff experience on our system, and a potential pilot of FAIR gates is part of that holistic commitment. I want to note that this strategy is being studied internally, and staff are preparing a summary of those opportunities. And this is something that we'll be engaging with the board on as we move forward. And I have also asked our finance folks to include funding to allow this initial work to happen in the 2026 budget. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. All right, we will move to public comment. And Katie, I don't believe there was any written public comment. Is that correct?
Correct. Correct. There are no written public comments. There are no virtual public comments. There is one person signed up to provide in-person public comment.
All right. And so we do welcome public comment as an important part of the process. Comments are received and considered by the committee in its deliberations. And so before we take verbal public comment, I want to review the ground rules for in-person commenting. Each commenter will have 2 minutes. Speakers should comment on the action they identified on the sign-up sheet and stay within the allotted time. All comments must be germane to the agenda items or items within the committee's purview. Speakers should not make introductory statements, derogatory remarks, profanity, or other personal attacks not germane to an agenda item, statements related to a political campaign, or statements for or against a candidate or ballot measure. Speakers should also not engage in conduct that disrupts, disturbs, or otherwise impedes the orderly conduct of this meeting, including conduct that is not germane to the committee's work or agenda. And this is the only warning that speakers will receive if these rules are not followed. I will ask for the microphone to be turned off, and I do sincerely appreciate your adherence to these rules. So, Katie, I will turn it over to you for the public comment.
Thank you. The person who signed up for public comment at today's meeting is Alex Zimmerman.
Hi, I am Alex Zimmerman. I want to speak about agenda number 6 about your CEO report. Today morning I wake up, something feels strange. Somebody like beat my head with hammer. This hammer talk, are you idiot? Where they will find $30 billion. Yeah, so yeah, this hammer don't give me chance sleep. A bad disabled old man, I not sleep too much, but hammer in my head is very, very bad too. So I try understand where is you can find this $30 billion for this pine, this ham sound transistor, what it will cost us $200 billion. Another $30 billion, another $30 billion, another $100 billion, another $100 billion. So I have my dream. Yeah, I have my dream. Whereas you will be in jail for stealing people money, acting like a bandita, like a thief, like a Nazi Gestapo fascist. When you will be in jail? I speak
Katie,
to this.
please turn off Mr. Zimmerman's microphone. I have asked that no derogatory or other types of remarks of that type are used, and you have violated that, Mr. Zimmerman. Thank you very much. Your time is up. Right. We will move on to item number 6, the Deputy CEO and CFO report. And I will ask Victoria Wassmer, our Finance and Business Administration Deputy CEO, to provide opening remarks.
Good morning, Chair Bacchus. It's good to be here with all of you this morning. I know that we have a very full agenda. I'm going to turn this over to Huey Newsome to start with the CFO report. We have several items for consideration by the committee, and he will walk through those briefly.
Thank you, Victoria. Well, I'd like to go directly into this report. Again, as Victoria alluded to, this really is going to be similar to an executive summary on the number of different actions that me and my team will be presenting to you all today. So we go to the next slide, please. We'll start off with kind of an update, a very high level update of where we are from a liquidity and budgetary performance standpoint. Then we'll move into an overview of what those requested board actions look like, and then just a quick reminder of what is to come. So we go to the next slide, please. So you all should have received your Q2 budgetary packages by now. I'm just going to give a very high level review of what that alluded to. You know, revenue today is above budget year to date. For 2025, and we expect it to remain above budget for the full year. Investment income performance is really driving that, and it more than offset tax revenue, some shortfalls on the tax revenue side that came in under budget. Expenses from our major projects, our service delivery projects, and our system expansion projects are tracking below budget year to date. We do expect some catch up by the end of the year, but we do expect that to be somewhat under those projects to come in somewhat under budget. But departmental budgets are tracking below budget as well in aggregate, and our vacancy rate is right about, just a little bit higher than what our budgetary assumption was. But I don't see any reason for alarm on that front. Our balance sheet remains quite strong. Right now, looking at our total liquid cash in the bank plus our investments, both short-term and long-term investments, we're sitting about $7.2 billion as of the end of the second quarter. And I think we presented the last time we did present that we had received affirmation from S&P on our bond ratings for the TIFIA prior and parity bonds. That we had affirmed those strong credit ratings on that front. And since then, we've also received affirmation, since we last met, that we have on our Moody's credit ratings on our prior bonds and our parity bonds as well. Next slide, please. So today we'll have a few board actions that will be in front of you. My colleagues, Ryan Fisher and Jeff Clark, will present on a number of different things. First, there will be the resolution to redeem about $75 million of floating rate notes to better position our debt portfolio as we start thinking about what that portfolio looks like heading into the early 2030s, when we'll have to start issuing debt again to support ST3. There's a resolution to add about $629 million that wasn't originally anticipated in the budget on our TIFIA loan. And this really reflects reality of earlier opening of Federal Way, which CEO Constantine had talked about in our last meeting. And these cash management actions, they align with best practices in dealing with our balance sheet, but also putting us in a position to really take advantage of some where the market is today, and really positioning us to be in a great shape when we start to issue debt, probably in around 2030. Ryan will present a net neutral budget amendment for 2025. I think we've have socialized this in other committees as well. This reflects our treatment of administrative costs as kind of a postmortem from our recent reorganization under MOST, or what we call the Project MOST. And then finally, just as a reminder, we had presented to other committees our proposed changes to the budget policy that will better align us for execution on our asset management strategy that we've talked about here in this forum and other forums, and to the board as a whole as well. Next slide, please. So that is today. We have a full agenda on top of an update on the enterprise initiative. And I use that as a segue into a reminder of what is to come. We will in October bring to you a proposed budget for 2026, as well as a tip for 2026 through 2031. And that will also coincide with our presentation of the long range financial plan for the years 2017 through 2046. Now, all this is important because Victoria and I will also update you on the enterprise initiative. And as you can imagine, at this point, given the focus of the enterprise initiative, that bullet point on long range financial plan, those conversations are going to start converging here very soon. What that long range financial plan shows and reflects will also be something that the enterprise initiative will be addressing. And we'll talk a little bit more about some critical assumptions that we would make for the long range financial plan as part of the enterprise initiative. Next slide, please. So with that, that's just a segue into those board actions. I'll hand it back over to the board chair, to the committee chair, excuse me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Huey and Victoria. So are there any questions from the committee for Huey or Victoria on this? All right. We will move to item 7, which is business items. There are 4 business items on today's agenda, 1 for committee final action and 3 for recommendation to the board. So the first are the minutes of the July 10th, 2025 Finance and Audit Committee minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Braddock, I move to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Roscoe, I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Member Braddock and a second by Member Roscoe. Is there any discussion? All right. All those in favor of the approval of the minutes of the July 10th, 2025 meeting, please say aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, please say no. The minutes of the July 10th, 2025 meeting pass. Right. And next is resolution number R 2025-23. And I'll call on Huey Newsome again, our Chief Financial Officer, and Ryan Fisher, Finance Executive Director, to provide a presentation on an update to the agency's budget structure.
I think that we will, with your permission, Madam Chair, I think we're going to call an audible. Are you doing the budget amendment first? Yes. So I just wanted to clarify that we'll be doing a presentation on the budget amendment first.
Okay.
Thank you, Huey, and Finance and Audit Committee board members. So here we are today. We are, next slide, please, requesting that the Finance and Audit Committee forward R 2025-23 to the board with a due pass recommendation. As mentioned earlier, we have presented this budget amendment already to the Executive Committee and the Rider Experience and Operations Committee. We will also present it to the System Expansion Committee later to inform all board members of this proposed amendment. Next slide, please. So a little bit of background and key takeaways about this amendment. The agency reorganized some of its structure internally effective earlier this year in May. This project was acronymed Project MOST, which stands for Mobilizing One Sound Transit. And some of the changes and shifts in some of the teams and functions and business lines of the agency will end up impacting where our external costs are reported and thus where the board has appropriated some of the budget. At the end of the day, this is not increasing any of our costs. It will actually provide some additional transparency into a few different areas of our cost structure, including for administrative support costs, fair and regional planning, general and administrative costs, and indirect costs that support both system expansion and service delivery projects. Next slide, please. So just to highlight a little bit of how we build up our budgets internally, so why this matters. If you see the first four colored lines there, the magenta, green, black, and blue, those areas end up on our financial statements as the operation and maintenance costs, general and administrative, fair and regional planning, and system expansion and service delivery project costs. There is this fifth category, which ends up as allocated costs, which as we build them up internally in our org structure, they then get spread externally to those four areas mentioned above on our financial statements, and thus also our budget. And so they show up in different areas in our budget appropriations. Next slide, please. To summarize the requested change today, we're requesting that the Finance and Audit Committee forward this on. This is a $67 million shift from one line item, which is agency administrative support costs, to both system expansion projects and transit modes. Additionally, because that agency administrative support line in our transit improvement plan has a lifetime authorization of $1.9 billion, $1.3 billion of that we are requesting to move and split now and shift that $1.3 billion to system expansion projects. As part of this move, we are now going to create a new line item for indirect costs that support our system expansion program. And just to highlight a future step, as you see our 26 budget, which you'll see in about a month, we will be breaking out details of all of these areas now moving forward in our proposed budget and transit improvement plan. You'll see the indirect costs for system expansion and service delivery projects, general administrative and fair and regional planning all separately. And just to reiterate, this budget amendment today here is neutral. There's no additional dollars. Next slide, please. And this just visually depicts what I was describing earlier. You can see there's that one line, agency administrative support, that $67 million. We are now amending this to shift it to both system expansion projects and transit modes. And going from the left column there, that was the board adopted budget. After this shift, on the far right column there, you would see our adopted budget with this amendment included. Bottom line, no net impact. Next slide, please. And then this just summarizes the changes in the transit improvement plan. The lifetime authorization for these agency administrative support costs were 1.9 billion. We would now shift 1.3 billion out of that into this indirect cost line item for system expansion costs. Moving forward, we will now have both of these indirect cost line items in our transit improvement plan. Next slide, please. In terms of next steps, we're requesting the Finance and Audit Committee forward this with a due pass recommendation to the board. Later this afternoon, we will also continue to inform the committees. This time we will go to the System Expansion Committee. Next slide, please. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions board members may have.
Thank you, Ryan. Are there any questions from the committee members? All right, I'm not hearing or seeing any. So Katie, will you read this into the record, please?
Yes, resolution number R 2025-23 is a resolution of the Board of the Central Puget Sound Regional Transit Authority amending the adopted 2025 annual budget by changing the category of certain expenditures as a result of internal reorganization with a net neutral impact to the 2025 annual budget.
Thank you. Is there a motion to forward resolution R 2025-23 to the board with a due pass recommendation?
Frizzell will make that motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
This is Roscoe. I'll second.
Thank you. The motion has been made by Member Frizzell and seconded by Member Roscoe. Is there any discussion?
I'll just add a couple of comments. So this was my second time seeing the presentation, and I've had some time to think about it in between as well. And the idea here is that it's a net zero. So we're moving money from one area to another, and I appreciate that lends transparency to say, hey, we really are looking at what we're doing, and this is our new projection. So that's all it is. It's just a realignment, and I support it.
Thank you. I agree with you. It is better. It makes more sense that things are aligned the way they're supposed to be and not simply just allowing it to continue to move forward after those changes were made. So thank you very much for that. And I think probably everyone here has heard the presentation at least once. And I'm looking forward to hearing it again this afternoon at the SEC meeting. All right, so if there is no further discussion, all those in favor of resolution R 2025-23, please say aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, please say no. All right, resolution R 2025-23 passes with a recommendation to the full board with a due pass recommendation. All right, moving on to resolution number R 2025-24. And I believe R 2025-25, are those both for Jeff Clark, our Controller Executive Director?
Yes.
Wonderful.
So I will provide a brief overview of our portfolios, and then we'll move into the discussion of the two resolutions. Next slide, please. So first, an overview of our investment portfolio. As Huey mentioned, total agency investments in the combined unrestricted and restricted portfolios are sitting at about $7.1 billion as of the end of June. And the portfolio remains well positioned. We continue to monitor the economic data and adjust the portfolio as appropriate. Next slide, please. Now, just a quick overview of the debt portfolio. The agency has, again, roughly $4.8 billion of outstanding debt in the form of both bonds and TIFIA borrowings. Again, we continuously review the portfolio and we take appropriate action based on market conditions. And a number of those actions do require board approval, including the issuance and redemption of debt, as well as any budget changes related to debt, which is what brings us to the next slide and our conversation of our portfolio actions. So again, Sound Transit, we regularly review our investment and debt portfolios. We're always seeking that balance between risk and return, as you can imagine, while also ensuring the funding of the system's operations and capital expansion. Per budget policy, the board is required to change budgeted long-term debt principal repayment, interest, and financing fees. And to that end, we have 2 resolutions that we're bringing before the committee today. And similar to Ryan, we're looking for that due pass recommendation to the full board. We'll first discuss resolution number R 2025-25, which is a redemption of a $75 million issue of floating rate notes. And then after we have that conversation, then we'll have a quick conversation about also increasing the 2025 debt issuance budget to capture an additional TIFIA draw, which was not originally contemplated in the 25 budget. Next slide, please. The agency in 2015, some of you may have been here, we issued $150 million in variable rate debt, and the issuance was divided into 2 issues of $75 million apiece. There was an A series and a B series, and that debt is tied to a variable index known as SIFMA. Please note that the first $75 million was redeemed in 2023, and now we're in the window where we have an option with our A series, and we have a couple options there. But as we looked at it, it just made a lot of sense. We considered multiple options in relation to this issue, and it was determined that a redemption, or better said, paying off this debt, is a preferred approach given market conditions, including higher interest rates, as well as the execution cost of a remarketing. It is worth noting that the agency has been very well served by floating rate instruments, and ultimately, as we move forward with funding the program, we will be looking at additional variable rate in the future. But if you look at the pie on the right, our variable rate is a very, very small piece. It's that little red sliver. And at this point in time, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to continue with it. So we're asking for the committee's approval to move this to the board to redeem this piece. I will pause there for any questions on this action.
Thank you, Jeff. Are there any questions by the committee members? Okay.
Excellent. So, Katie, I don't know if we're doing the resolution now or after we do the other one.
Chair Backus, it looks like we can continue with this presentation to cover both actions, or we can pause here for the committee to consider the first action, which is on the agenda. The next action is R 2025-24. I believe Mr. Clark has talked about resolution R 2025-25. So it may make sense to continue the presentation so both of the resolutions are covered.
I would
Perfect.
agree, Jeff, if you wouldn't mind going ahead and finishing the presentation, then we'll take them in the order that they are on the agenda.
Perfect. Excellent. So here on the screen on the right-hand side is a table from the Q2 ALM report. And again, each member of the committee receives the Asset and Liability Management Report quarterly. This table shows our available TIFIA loans, and it also shows the amounts that have been drawn to date. The 2025 budget included estimated draws of $1.5 billion, and the remainder of the draws were planned for future years. However, as we look at prudent cash management and best practices, and again, as Huey mentioned, that quicker than anticipated opening of the Federal Way link extension, we feel it's appropriate to accelerate certain of these draws into 2025. And staff will complete the full draws on Eastlink, Federal Way link, and Redmond link in 2025, pending committee and board approval of the higher draw. And you can see there on the right that the additional draws will be roughly $630 million. And we do have a place in the portfolio already set up to handle this. And again, it will help with our cash management. I will pause for any questions on this action.
Thank you, Jeff. Members, do you have any questions for Jeff on either of the actions that were in this presentation? All right. Jeff, looks like you did a very thorough job explaining this for us. Thank you very much. It's not easy, but you make it sound very easy in the way that you explain it. So thank you for that. All right, Katie, would you please read Resolution R 2025-24 into the record?
Resolution number R 2025-24 is a resolution of the Board of the Central Puget Sound Regional Transit Authority amending the adopted 2025 budget to increase the 2025 annual bonds and TIFIA loan proceeds budget by $629,472,431 from $1,514,197,742 to $2,143,670,173.
Thank you, Katie. Is there a motion to forward Resolution R 2025-24 to the board with a due pass recommendation?
This is Roscoe. Go ahead, Braddock.
Oh, Braddock. Braddock to move the resolution, please.
Thank you.
Roscoe, second.
Thank you. We have a motion from Member Braddock and a second from Member Roscoe. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of resolution number R 2025-24, please say aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, please say no. Resolution R 2025-24 has been approved for a due pass recommendation to the full board. All right, next we have resolution number R 2025-25, which was also part of Jeff's presentation. Katie, will you read R 2025-25 into the record?
Resolution number R 2025-25 is a resolution of the Board of the Central Puget Sound Regional Transit Authority authorizing the redemption prior to maturity of the authority's outstanding Series 2015S-2A bonds using available funds, delegating authority to effect the redemption, and providing for other matters properly relating thereto.
Thank you. Is there a motion to forward resolution R 2025-25 to the board with a due pass recommendation?
This is Roscoe. I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Braddock will second that motion.
Thank you very much. We'll bookend this. All right, we have a motion by Member Roscoe and a second by Member Braddock. Is there any discussion? Right, all those in favor of forwarding to the board with a due pass recommendation, resolution number R 2025-25, please say aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, please say no. Thank you. Resolution R 2025-25 passes. All right, we will move to item 8, Enterprise Initiative Update. And I will call on Victoria Wassmer, our Finance and Business Administration Deputy CEO, to provide opening remarks and to begin the report.
Good morning again, committee members. Today, we are here to provide an update on the Enterprise Initiative and to go a bit further in depth on key considerations for this committee. As you were aware, on August 28th, we shared with this board the initiative and quantified our affordability challenge in detail. Now we'd like to begin considering approaches to addressing these challenges. Moving on to the second slide, please. In today's meeting, we'd like to revisit the agency's cost challenges, zooming in a bit more on the problem to offer additional clarifications and provide opportunities to ask more questions. We'd like to outline strategies to increase financial capacity. We will then discuss high-level strategies on increasing our revenues and financial strategies that we'll propose to the committee. We feel that sharing this approach is critical at this stage before diving into the specific activities themselves. And then next, we'd like to preview the next steps on when we will be sharing the plan and moving forward to the next and subsequent committee meetings, given the board's resolution at the August board meeting. Moving on to the next slide. Well, we may have come to you with the affordability gap in August and the concept of the Enterprise Initiative at the board retreat in May. We had already begun to consider strategies to address affordability gap. This began as an effort last year once motion 2024-059 was approved. After the passage of that motion, Finance began to brainstorm not only actions that could be taken to increase financial capacity, but just as importantly, a framework to vet these proposed actions. This effort has developed strategies that we will propose to utilize in addressing your directive in the recently passed motion 2025-36. Moving on to the next slide. When that motion was passed in last October, 2024-059, the focus was on West Seattle Link Extension. Since then, as we discussed last week in our board meeting, we did a complete program review and revealed that we had a program affordability problem, not just a project level issue. We now know that there has been a 20 to 25% cost increase since publishing the long-range financial plan in the fall of 2024. The capital program cost growth is approximately 14 to 20 billion more in 2025 dollars, or translated into year of expenditure dollars, 22 billion to 30 billion range, which is often referred to as year of expenditure. The cost pressures related to improved service delivery could require approximately 5 billion more in year of expenditure. And revenue and financing challenges from lower revenue and higher financing costs result in an impact of between 4 to 5 billion in YO. It's important to note that the projections of lower revenues are based on expert analysis from our consultant partners that have a view of regional and national macroeconomic trends. This could move in another direction or even get worse as our economic climate changes during our periodic reviews, which happen twice a year. I will now pass this over to Huey Newsome to discuss the affordability gap more specifically.
Thank you very much, Victoria. If we can go to the next slide, please. So Victoria talked a little bit about, the buckets and specifically what the amount of the affordability gap is within those buckets. I'd like now to kind of show that on a time horizon. So you can see graphically here, if you look at the teal, these are affordable expenditures under our current financial plan. When you see the gold, roughly about 2033, we're no longer able to fund certain expenditures with available resources or bonding capability. We have to bond outside of our financial constraints, our policy-driven constraints, in order to afford what's in the goals. So that is the visualization, if you will, of what we are now categorizing as our affordability gap. I think it's important to note this because as you see, as we discussed in last month's board presentation, our ability to fund our current expenditures is not the problem. It's really looking beyond once we get into the 2030s, it's really getting beyond into that range to talk through when we start running into a situation where we can't afford those expenditures, or we don't have the ability to bond under our financial constraints. Next slide, please. So one thing we wanted to do here is make it clear, kind of the approach we're taking. So as you can see here, I think we've discussed this before, the FAC will have a unique responsibility and a role along with staff that will be supporting that. We'll be looking at those sources. So if you think of the long-range financial plan, you have a number of sources: our tax revenue, our fair revenue, our grant revenue. Those are kind of the levers that we have to work with. One of the more important ones, of course, proceeds from financing, our bonding capabilities. So those are the things we'll be working with in conjunction with the work that will go into that will be performed in Rio with looking at service delivery, our operation and maintenance costs, as well as the SCC with the capital expansion. There is the need for us to be closely linked because as we look at potential savings or potential cost increases on the capital delivery side that could impact things like our grant revenue. We might have opportunities to get more grants. So there is that linking. Plus some of the things that we might be proposing when it comes to operational expense efficiencies might require upfront investments. So it's going to be very important to have this linkage and this kind of this cross-pollination as we go forward. Next slide, please. So as you see here on this slide, this is basically a reminder, if you will, when we discuss affordability, what do we mean? The key things that we use to judge affordability, as we've discussed before, is our ability to either fund expenditures with our current resources or issue debt so that our debt remains within these two financial policies. Our net debt service coverage ratio right now and our legal debt capacity. Debt service coverage ratio is how many times your net revenue covers your debt service requirements in a period of time. The legal debt capacity is our total debt capacity, which must remain within 1.5% of the assessed value within the Sound Transit District. Now, when these constraints aren't met, a plan is not affordable. When we produced this plan, the last affordable plan was fall 2024. When we produced this plan, there were a number of pinch points that you can see here that are displayed. A pinch point is when we approach those constraints without going over. We did not go over when we produced the plan in 2024, but we came close at a certain point. When we look at debt service coverage ratio constraint, we come close when we look at the legal debt capacity as well. And you can see that on the slide. Now, because the plan is not affordable, we trip those constraints. But what we would be looking to do is get the long range plan to a point that we no longer trip those constraints. But it's very important to know that those are the parameters we'll be working with as we define affordability. Next slide, please. So let's start talking a little bit about some specific actions. And, as we think about this, as Victoria alluded to before, we've been looking at this in reaction to the motion that was presented last year in 2024. So finance has been working very closely with our partners, our financial advisor, our investment banking community, our consultants that really support us on projections for indices, for sales tax revenue, those projections. We've been looking at a number of different options, and that process really does continue. But if you were to bucket these actions or these potential options, if you will, into a menu of different things, you can categorize them into 4 different buckets. I really want to focus on the top bucket right now, which is really looking at the assumptions that we use when we go and build the long-range financial plan and making sure that we revisit those so that they are current and not overly conservative. And those planning assumptions deal with certain things with revenue, with debt, our reserve levels as well. Now, the other 3 are here for your information. Those things are things that we will discuss in the future board action. So I talked about policies a minute ago in relation to debt service coverage ratio. There are a number of different policies that the board has control over, direct control over, that we can take as well. But I think that is something that we can review later as we continue to research the impact and the risk associated with those. Additional revenues. Do we want to assume additional revenues? I talked about the revenue buckets in the previous slide. And then partnerships. Are there opportunities where we can work with stakeholders outside of Sound Transit, more specifically other agencies, private partners, P3, for instance, that we can look at to produce other income streams? So again, those are later down the road. I think the one thing that's immediate, kind of low hanging fruit that we want to dive into here today is going to be along those planning assumptions that you see on this slide. Next slide, please. So, excuse me. What you see here are a number of different assumptions that are built into the financial plan. You see that the description here is what we assumed or what we were proposing. We changed from the assumption that we had in last year's plan. I'd like to go through each of these in detail. So first, currently we assume that we are going to undercollect on our property taxes by 1%. Historically, we have not seen a material undercollection at all on our property taxes, but for conservative purposes, we assume that undercollection of 1%. This is something that we are really concluding our research on this, but we feel strongly that this is an opportunity for us in order to be a little bit less conservative when we build the long-range financial plan. Secondly, the clean fuel standard revenue. So in 2021, the state of Washington passed the ability for us to get revenue because of the fact that we run our 1-line and 2-line mostly with what's called a clean fuel. We don't run it on carbon. And because of that, we are seeing roughly at least $80 million in revenue a year through 2046. We're projecting that. That assumption is not built into the long range plan. And that is something we can build into the plan with relatively low risk, even potential more opportunity that we're looking into right now. But for now, we feel comfortable with the $80 million. Excuse me. In addition to that, interest earnings. So right now, as Jeff alluded to before, right now we have a very strong balance sheet. And our assumption is that balance sheet is going to continue to produce interest earnings, at least until 2030. And at certain points in time, we'll have even more. The underlying assumption of what we're earning on that investment is currently at 2%. And we're looking very strongly at raising that up by 50 basis points. I want to be very clear here. Over the last couple of years, we've been seeing 4.9%. I think everyone is familiar with what's going on currently with interest rates. And so we feel comfortable and again, have vetted this with our investment banking partners and our FA financial advisor that a 50 basis point increase, considering where we are with our assumptions, is safe. On the flip side, we are conservative to the point that we currently have an assumption of 5.3% on issued debt. And we feel that we can lower that to 5%. And finally, our issuance costs. Last time we issued debt was 2021. And, since then, the market has shown us that the 1.25%, this is issuance costs. So the fees, if you will, associated with issuing that debt is 1.25% is definitely overly conservative. And so we feel that we can reduce that from 1.25% to 1%. And so we're finalizing the vetting of these assumptions. And so this should be ready to go when it's time for us to present the long range financial plan, and wanting to make sure that we had some time to socialize these findings with the committee in advance of the presentation of the long range financial plan. So with that, before I go to the next slide, I do want to make sure that it's very clear that these, again, have been reviewed, researched, but macroeconomic conditions could shift. And as Victoria mentioned before, we review the financial plan normally, twice a year, where we will go back and look at these macroeconomic conditions. So if we were to incorporate these assumptions and then things change, we have to come back as we normally do when we look at our forecasts and update the financial plan. Okay.
Huey, do you want to take questions now? Do you want us to wait until the end of your presentation? Which would you prefer?
I can take questions now as we go.
Okay.
I have a couple, 2 or 3 more slides, but we can take questions as we go. Are there any questions as of now?
There are. Member Frizzell has a question. And Member Frizzell, you are muted. I know. Don't we hate that?
I know.
Ah,
Last week I was in a meeting and the crinkling of my fruit snack got annoying. So anyhow, could you put slide number 9 back up, Mr. Newsom? So I don't like getting too far ahead of our skis. I like conservative assumptions, especially with our revenue. So I would be interested in learning how long each of these have been our practice. And, maybe go back and give us a 5-year look back as to how we have fared with those. I'm not ready to make a determination yet without that. And also, what are the asterisks on the last 3, 4?
Good question. So those are the ones that are more prone to macroeconomic shifts. So I'll address your second question first. Those are the ones that are more prone to macroeconomic shifts. So the top 2 asterisk ones are the ones that are based on interest rate. So right now where we are with market interest rates, both for what we lend out, if you will, what we have in our investments, and then what we plan to experience when we issue new debt. Obviously, that's going to be a function of market interest rates, which, as you know, you can see that moving. The Fed may cut 25 basis points to the federal funds rate here in a few weeks. So those are the ones that are a little bit more prone to market forces versus the top 2, which are truly our assumption of what we're seeing, or what we have in terms of our assumptions of our ability to collect revenue, or what we're seeing from the fuel standard.
So based upon our national economic status and how crazy it's been the last 9 months, it's interesting that we're being asked to cut our cushion a little bit more. So if we could look at 5 years back, that would be helpful to me. Thank you.
If I may, Madam Chair, we will definitely provide that look back when we roll out the long range financial plan for sure. I'll make a note of that action. Thank you.
thank you. And then just one thing from me. So, excuse me, in the columns, the benefit to financial plan. So there's, I guess maybe a key would be helpful here. Are there going to be some assumptions that benefit us to $2 signs? Is there a range? And also then the color of the dots to make sure that we understand fully the green, the yellow, will there be red? So if we could have a key on what each one of those items mean, I think that would be helpful as well. But I do agree with Member Frizzell on the property tax collection. Have we been over collecting based on our assumptions for the last 5 years? And have we been receiving that revenue for the clean fuel standards to the point where we feel comfortable with those projections? I think those would go a long way. Thank you, Member Frizzell, for asking for that to help with a comfort level when things do feel a little volatile right now.
And Madam Chair, what I can do is there is a legend that should have been in the presentation. What we can do, I'm looking at my friends in board admin, I think we can put that in the final version of the presentation, so that that's a pretty easy thing to accomplish. The 1%, the 1% we historically have not come close. I'm looking around, but we really have had no material under collection in the last 5 years, which is why we feel comfortable removing it. But we will quantify that when we present the long-range financial plan as part of that backup for the assumption changes.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, please continue. And thanks for allowing the interruption.
No problem. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So just to kind of close the loop here, those assumption changes would add of roughly $1 to $2 billion of additional capacity into the long-range financial plan. And so I think the important thing here to note is that, number one, we still have some work to do ahead of us, but it also provides that impact pretty much upfront. So that helps buy us a little bit of time and provide us some immediate relief, but we still have the remainder of the affordability gap to address. Next slide, please. So next steps, and I really do appreciate the members of the committee for their feedback. We are wrapping up the vetting of those assumptions, and so we'll share the data when we go to roll out the long-range financial plan, so that you have, the right amount of comfort with the approach that we're taking with these assumption changes. We will take that as an IOU. And then we'll continue to explore risk and impact of potential board actions, kind of that next level of that next bucket or next level of actions that we talked about before in the opportunity menu. So we'll continue to explore the risk and impact of those and present that to you upon readiness. And then finally, we'll continue to look at the other levers on that slide that we talked about before, the partnerships, the revenue and the other revenue enhancements as well. So with that, I'm finished with the presentation and happy to entertain any other questions.
Thank you. Committee members, are there any other questions? It's a lot to take in. And you thought the finance committee, being on the finance committee, would be good because we don't meet as often as the other committees. Member Roscoe.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to take this opportunity to thank staff and recognize the value of the process where we are hearing about these things multiple times and then having the opportunity at committee level to discuss these items. These kind of things really are going to always take more than one meeting to make quality decisions on. So thank you, staff, and thank you, fellow committee members, for engaging.
Thank you, Member Roscoe. All right, we will, if there are no other comments or questions, we'll move to item number 9, which is the internal audit report. And I'll call on Moises Gutierrez, Deputy CEO of Agency Oversight, to provide remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. Happy to be here this morning. As usual, Patrick will provide the internal audit update for the third quarter. But before that, I do want to highlight a couple of items. First, as a key CEO priority, we have made improvements to enhance management action plans. So these are action-oriented and timely. In today's update, we have 2 internal performance audits with findings. And as CEO Constantine noted at the top of the meeting, we are pleased to report that the agency has already begun implementing corrective action plans. And in several cases, these are already complete. And you will note that the management action plans and responses reflect this new, much more robust approach. Patrick's team is updating internal audit processes to ensure we maintain this standard over time. Secondly, other than advising this committee that it will be a very busy end of year as we have several audits in the queue, Also, in the fourth quarter, Patrick will be presenting the 2026 audit plan with input from the Community Oversight Panel. That will come to you over the next few months. Thank you, Madam Chair. Patrick, over to you.
Thank you, Moises. Thank you, Chair Backus and members of the Finance and Audit Committee. Good morning, everyone. I'm Patrick Johnson, the Deputy Executive Director of Sound Transit's Internal Audit Division in the Agency Oversight Department. Again, thank you for the opportunity to share the update on audit work completed during the third quarter of 2025. For committee members' awareness, the data classification of this presentation is unrestricted. Next slide, please. So our presentation today will briefly update the committee on the agency's external audit work and the 2025 internal audit plan progress through the third quarter of the year. There are no action items for the committee today. Next slide, please. So before diving into the agency's internal audit work, I'd like to highlight two external activities from the past quarter. First, the Pacific Northwest Regional Office of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA for short, recently finished their review of the agency's Preparedness Grant Awards, and I'm happy to share that their review had no audit findings. Additionally, in late August, the agency was notified that the Washington State Auditor's Office, or SAO, will begin their annual accountability audit in mid-September. For those unfamiliar with this effort, the state auditor performs annual accountability audits of local governments, including Sound Transit, to review financial activity from the previous year. This includes checking expenditures, revenues, contracts, and reporting practices to ensure strong internal controls and proper use of public resources. The finance team, under the leadership of CFO Huey Newsome and my internal audit staff, are actively supporting the state auditor's work and will keep the committee informed as their audit progresses. We anticipate that work is to be completed during the fourth quarter of this year. Next slide, please. So first, I want to quickly revisit our audit plan dashboard depicted here. We've refreshed the design with data pulled continuously from internal audit system known as Teammate and updated through regular cross-departmental collaboration. So the audit schedule covers 34 audits across 5 different functions: internal audit, environmental, finance, information technology or IT, and quality. And by the end of Q3, 16 audits are complete, 11 are in progress, and 7 have not started, placing us just under the 50% completion rate. Looking at the middle section, you'll see the special audits and loss reports we're tracking. Special audits are those works that are unplanned, high-risk audit work directed by the CEO or the Finance and Audit Committee Chair. Currently, we're still working on one shown here, and we'll share the results at the next Finance and Audit Committee meeting. Finally, in the middle right section shows 8 audit findings that our internal audit team has identified so far this year that we will closely monitor through the remainder of the year. Just so committee members are aware, this dashboard is live, and you can find it by clicking at the bottom of the slide or typing audit plan dashboard at st.org. Next slide, please. So these next 2 slides give you a quick, at a glance overview of the third quarter audit activities agency-wide, covering both internal audit work and audits performed within other functions. For reference, I'll only cover the top 3 projects highlighted in purple, whose audit reports are in your packets today. The remaining audits are listed for awareness purposes only. My internal audit team is finalizing a concise summary report to showcase that work without overwhelming you with hundreds of pages of reports. As soon as that report is ready, I'll share it with the committee. Next slide, please. This slide continues a snapshot overview of audit work completed this quarter. Next slide, please. Over the next several slides, I'll briefly go over the summaries of the completed internal audit work from my teams. Next slide. So earlier this quarter, we completed our annual safety audit of Sound River Commuter Rail as part of the 2025 Comprehensive Agency Audit Plan. This audit is required annually to meet both Federal Railroad Administration, or FRA, and internal agency standards. Our audit work focused primarily on safety procedures, daily operations, and maintenance oversight of our contracted partners who help run our commuter rail service. Auditors also assessed how well we're following our own System Safety Plan, or SSP, and whether our partners are meeting their contractual obligations. Our audit reviewed work performed between October 2024 through April 2025. Our audit identified 5 findings, and I'll outline the themes, and management will present corrective actions on the next slide. Next slide, please. So in summary, our audit findings fall into 2 categories: safety oversight and contractor maintenance oversight. More specifically, our oversight of BNSF as our contract operator and Amtrak as our contract maintainer for Sounder Commuter Rail. I'll walk you through those categories in more depth over my next couple of slides. Next slide, please. So for safety oversight, auditors found that the process for elevating safety concerns is not being followed consistently, even though our system safety plan outlines a clear process for doing so. In short, the FRA and Sound Transit's own safety plan states the agency must clearly track, document, and if necessary, elevate concerns to the proper level to address, accept, and mitigate potential or actual risks. Risks are then logged and reviewed by safety and service delivery staff every 2 months. Using the hazard resolution requirements matrix, staff then categorize and prioritize risks by minimum actions to take, management awareness, and risk acceptance to address and correct the issue, ultimately ranking the risks from acceptable, meaning low risk, managed by the business unit and safety, to unacceptable, meaning work stoppage, immediate correction, and senior executive notification. In this instance, auditors found that over a 12-month period, 11 risks were listed and tracked as undesirable or unacceptable, the 2 highest levels, and had no mitigation actions, no formal risk acceptance, and no record of escalation to senior executives, even though all risks were tracked. Auditors also found that some staff are performing duties and tasks outside of their defined roles or responsibilities as defined in the system safety plan, meaning certain employees were engaging in oversight activities they weren't formally assigned or trained for, which can create confusion about accountability and increase the risk of safety gaps. The SSP specifies the roles and responsibilities of key personnel concerning safety and contractor oversight in alignment with FRA requirements. However, there was a discrepancy between what the agency's staff said they were doing in writing and the actual day-to-day duties performed. That inconsistency resulted in ambiguity regarding task assignments and could contribute to potential safety risks not being addressed, particularly in areas of maintenance and contractor oversight. Next slide, please. For contractor maintenance oversight, the FRA and our own system safety plan set specific rules on how maintenance procedures must be followed, and the Sound Transit is responsible for ensuring contracted maintenance work meets our standards to ensure our trains are safe and that there are no gaps in preventive and corrective maintenance on our equipment. Auditors found there was no documented maintenance oversight program to ensure Amtrak maintenance follows Sound Transit's agreements and procedures. Auditors observed that Amtrak had sometimes skipped over work order steps, potentially leading to non-compliant Sounder vehicles being used during and for revenue service. The auditors also found that Amtrak uses less restrictive wheel truing specifications than those recommended by Sounder's car manufacturer. For those unfamiliar, wheel truing is the process of reshaping and smoothing train wheels to keep the ride smooth, ensuring the wheel stays in contact with the rails, which prevents derailments. Auditors also found there's no clear process for our contractors to report defective equipment to one another or to Sound Transit. For clarity, BNSF is contracted to operate our trains, Amtrak is contracted to maintain them. The FRA requires that maintenance defects found during daily safety inspections, like those on locomotives and cab cars, be recorded on specific FRA-required forms. While we found evidence of daily inspections happening, the follow-up documentation of such inspections isn't always consistent. Additionally, BNSF crews do not have a process to report issues on coach or passenger cars. Crews use informal methods such as text messaging back and forth from Sound Transit mechanical staff to communicate maintenance equipment defects. And lastly, auditors found that contract oversight procedures for Amtrak's maintenance work is inconsistent. Amtrak handles rail equipment maintenance under a contract agreement. To properly oversee this work, Sound Transit needs regular and easy access to records and reports, as outlined in our own procedures. However, auditors found that many of these records were hard to locate, some were still in paper form, and in some cases, not available to agency staff when needed. With that, I'll turn the presentation over to Andrea Trepidine, Acting Chief Safety Officer, and George McGinn, Executive Operations Director, Service Delivery, who will provide the agency's management action plans over the next couple of slides. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Patrick, and members of the Finance Audit Committee. Like Patrick said, my name is Andrea Trepidine. I'm our Acting Chief Safety Officer. The first audit finding was inconsistent elevation of safety concerns. And we corrected that finding by making an update to the safety escalation process within the Joint Rail Safety Committee. This procedural update ensures consistency of the elevation of safety concerns. In addition to a procedural update, the Safety Division is upgrading our safety risk management software. The new software, which is starting user acceptance this month, allows Sound Transit to use technology to create visibility and consistency across all modes for risk management, including issue escalation. The Safety Division also adjusted the meeting frequency for the Joint Rail Safety Committee to monthly meetings as detailed in the Sounder System Safety Plan. Speaking of the Sounder System Safety Plan, the next audit finding identified the staff duties listed in the plan were not consistent. The Sounder System Safety Plan, last updated in June 2024, is under the annual review now and expected to be completed this November. Updates for this annual review will include updated staff duties and reflect the changes from the agency's reorganization that occurred at the start of the year. Next slide, please. I will now pass the presentation over to George.
Thank you, Andrea, and members of the Audit and Finance Committee. My name is George McGinn. I am the Sound Transit Executive Operations Director of Rolling Stock. The first finding, inadequate assessment of contractor maintenance activities meeting agency and FRA requirements, was corrected by officially notifying Amtrak of our intent to perform inspections, and by performing these inspections on a scheduled and non-scheduled basis at the Amtrak maintenance facilities. This effort was activated shortly after hiring a new Sound Transit maintenance manager. Both scheduled and non-scheduled surveillances began in June of 2025. These inspections are performed on a twice-weekly basis. Additionally, a Sound Transit Amtrak agreement matrix was developed to accurately contain deliverables both on the part of Sound Transit and Amtrak. This matrix is used by Sound Transit staff to track compliance to agreement terms. Sound Transit procedures will be updated to reflect the changes presented today, and staff will work to expedite their completion. Added time was allotted to allow for stakeholder review of these updates prior to full implementation. The second finding, insufficient reporting process for defective sounder equipment, is in process by holding daily meetings with Amtrak, BNSF, and ST Service Delivery to review equipment defects, daily preventive maintenance, equipment pulls and release projections, and other business items required to support daily sounder commuter rail service. Minutes of these meetings reflect fleet status and is shared with the stakeholders of that meeting every day. The ST Asset Management Rolling Stock team also hold regularly scheduled monthly meetings with Amtrak to review outstanding issues and assign or review action items for completion. Conversations with ST, Amtrak, and BNSF leadership emphasizing the requirement to utilize MAP 21 and MAP 100 forms used to report mechanical defects to Amtrak have taken place. Those forms are in use today and can be found in the locomotive and passenger car MAP books. Work is continuing between ST and our Amtrak BNSF partners to update respective procedures to include the ongoing use of these forms. This will require both Amtrak and BNSF to update respective internal procedures to align with the ST standards. ST is also in the process of updating internal standard operating procedures to include these requirements. The third finding, Amtrak inconsistently follow contract oversight for maintenance, is in process through the reconciliation of audit findings F2 and F3 shown above. Sound Transit procedures are under review for updates to reflect ongoing activities and regular oversight inspections. Service Delivery has been working with ST Data Analytics for the past 2 years to make electronic what has been a manual process which captures operational data used to monitor and measure operational performance. In addition, Service Delivery plans to enhance this app to include electronic recording and communication of equipment defects when they occur. The intent behind this enhancement is for this app to replace the handwritten map forms. Service Delivery will continue to work with the data analytics and SDIT departments to bring available resources to this project. Now I return the presentation back over to Patrick Johnson. Thank you.
Next slide, please. Thank you, George. Now on to our second completed audit performed on fair compliance. This audit was performed based on agency risk as part of the 2025 Comprehensive Agency Audit Plan, focusing on fair compliance practices, inspection rates, citation activity, and the overall safety of fair ambassadors. Our audit reviewed board and agency policies, incident reports, citation data, and direct observation through job shadowing. The audit work was performed between 2022 through April 2025, resulting in one audit finding, which I'll discuss with management responses in the upcoming slides. Next slide, please. So our audit finding found that job hazards for fair ambassadors are not being properly identified or assessed. The agency's Accident Prevention Plan, or APP, requires that when a new job position is created, a job hazard analysis, or JHA, must be completed to identify potential task-specific job hazards and outline steps to reduce risks before work begins. We shadow fair ambassador staff and supervisors across all transit modes and reviewed their tasks during the audit. This helped us identify potential operational risks in their work and verify if those hazards had been documented properly, which at the time of the audit, they were not. With that, I'll turn the presentation over to Brian DePlace, Acting Executive Director for Security and Fair Engagement, to provide the agency's management response and action plan. Additionally, Andrea Trepidine, Acting Chief Safety Officer, will be available with Brian for any additional questions regarding the management response. Next slide, please.
Great. Thank you, Patrick. As Patrick mentioned, the audit did identify that a job hazard analysis had not been formally documented when the Fair Ambassador pilot program was established a number of years ago. That process is actually administered in our safety department, and I want to thank my colleague Andrea, once we learned of this, to moving with me quickly and urgently to make sure that this was completed in a very timely manner. So thank you for just working with me to address that quickly. So concretely, that analysis, they assess specific job tasks for the frontline environment, including the potential for verbal and physical confrontations with our staff. We then use that analysis to inform improvements that are listed there on the slide, including training, equipment, staffing, and the establishment of safety targets, so we can track and reduce incidents, all of which we are developing in partnership with our safety team, and many of which were in flight already when we became aware of these findings, or this finding. Specifically, we are piloting direct radio connectivity to our Security Operations Center. We've also enhanced coordination between the security and Fair Ambassador and teams, including joint field presence and scenario planning around potential incidents. We have strengthened our incident review process to ensure action items and clear accountability for follow-up. We will also be rolling out a more standardized uniform later this year to visibly reinforce the association as Sound Transit officials. And finally, as part of the Regional Safety Task Force, we are helping inform a regional rider code of conduct, which outlines expectations for our passengers and clearly identifies fair ambassadors as transit workers, where assaults will not be tolerated. In fact, even today, you can now hear new language on our platforms addressing transit worker assaults, and additional notifications on our vehicles will be forthcoming. That concludes my part of the presentation. I'll hand it back to Patrick. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. I'll move on to my final audit summary, the internal audit of the Environmental and Sustainability Management System, or ESMS program. This audit is performed annually by my team to check how well the agency aligns with ISO, or Internal Organization of Standards, and support continued compliance towards environmental oversight. We looked at environmental practices, risk planning objectives, and how the sustainability program is managed and operated. The audit included a review of board and agency policy, internal procedures, and spill response protocols. We also performed site visits to observe compliance activities and reporting in action. I'm pleased to report that this audit resulted in no findings, showing strong alignment with ISO requirements across all areas we reviewed. Next slide, please. My last two slides coming up are reminders of what we have planned in the next few months and what you should expect to see as the year begins to wrap up the 2025 audit plan. Next slide. As shown in this slide and the following slide, several audits are underway, primarily led by the efforts from my internal audit team, along with efforts supporting finance and quality functions. Shown on the far right, we are tracking when the expected audit reports results should be reported. You'll also see the remaining audits that have not started yet show up on the slide during a future Finance and Audit Committee meeting. Next slide, please. That concludes my presentation today. As always, thank you for allowing me time to present, and I appreciate the committee's time and attention. And if there are any questions, I'm ready to answer. Thank you, Chair Backus.
Wonderful. Thank you, Patrick, Andrea, George, Brian. Thank you all. Did I miss anyone? That was a lot to report. And Moises, thank you very much as well. I have question from Member Frizzell.
And maybe this question goes to CEO Constantine, but I thought that in your opening remarks that you queued us up to talk or have a report on fair compliance and fair gates, or is that something that's coming to us at a later time?
That's right, the latter. What I was saying is we are teeing up some options for the board to move forward with a pilot on fair gates. I've directed that we put in our proposed budget funding to help begin that pilot, and the staff has been directed to bring together the information that we have, and there have been some past studies that we can build on so that this fall the board will have a chance to consider and provide direction for us to move forward in developing at least initial Fairgate program. No, it was not for presentation at today's meeting. It's just related to some of the audit findings.
All right, I'll wait. Thank you.
I'll come visit you.
Okay.
Member Roscoe.
Thank you, Chair. I just shared with the CEO a text report I made in May from a sounder train, and just wanted to let this committee know I had requested additional information, basically a follow-up to see how my report was documented. So along with that, I am curious to hear from staff, either in writing or at a future committee meeting, what they see as improvements that can be made on the reporting and of issues. It was easy for me to find the text number, and I did receive a real-time response on the issue I noted. But if there's room for improvement there, I just am curious to hear if staff has plans for implementation, or if they are satisfied with at least that part of our reporting system. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Brown.
Board Member Roscoe.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, Board Member Roscoe, I believe we have an audit that is forthcoming on that work, so more to follow.
Thank you.
Sorry, Board Member, this is Moises Gutierrez with Agency Oversight. Just to address your question and insight directly, we are continuously looking to improve our reporting mechanisms. As my colleague George McGinn noted during his remarks, there's work underway to do that. We have already made those improvements as I view it. And like Patrick noted, there's active work underway to enhance that reporting. George, I don't know if there's anything you would like to add.
Moises, in particular, which reporting are we? I'm not familiar with the reporting.
Sounder.
Right.
Sounderation.
Are we talking about performance metrics? Okay, yes. So there are members of our team that is working with the analytics department to develop the performance metrics associated with the Sounder operational performance, as well as the maintenance performance for that mode of transportation. That work is ongoing, as Moises had indicated. So we're excited to be able to use some of the Power BI tools that we have at our disposal now so that we can do a better job managing our mode of transportation.
Thank you, George. My question is actually way into the minor issues and weeds category, specifically about passenger texting an issue that they witness on a train, not necessarily operational.
Sure. So we receive passenger comments and inquiries through the normal communication processes we have within Sound Transit. And then members of the service delivery team, whether they be in service operations or maintenance, depending on the type of question that it is, provide answers to those inquiries. And then those inquiries are then answered by the appropriate folks that do that kind of work.
That answer.
That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. All right. Member Braddock.
Oh, thank you, Chair. And I will admit this is more of a comment and an emphasis than a question, but I just want to appreciate, I really do believe that the identification of the job hazards related to the ambassadors is a top priority to be sure we're addressing. And I just want to appreciate that the staff has laid out some clear steps for the agency to move forward with to address that. And I look forward to seeing more of that come to fruition. So thank you for your work to be sure that we're addressing that issue in a very clear and transparent way.
Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you all very much for a very thorough report today. I know there's a lot going on, and we appreciate all of the transparency in this work. All right, we will move on. We have no reason for an executive session today. Is there any other business that needs to come before the committee today? I'm hearing none, and I'm seeing heads nodding. So we will move to item 11, which is our next meeting, and that is on October 9th at 10:30 a.m. And the meeting will take place in the Ruth Fisher Boardroom and virtually via Zoom. So the link to join the meeting virtually will be provided on the Sound Transit website as well as on the meeting agenda. And with that, 1 minute to spare. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Bye.